You know, there are certain technical words in every academic discipline that soon become stereotypes and cliches. And every academic discipline has its technical nomenclature. Modern psychology has a word that is probably used more than any other word in modern psychology. It is the word maladjusted. And this is the ringing cry of modern child psychology, maladjusted. And certainly we all want to live the well-adjusted life in order to avoid neurotic and schizophrenic personalities. But as I enter my conclusion this evening, I'd like to submit on to you that there are some things within our social order to which that I am proud to be maladjusted. And I call upon all persons of goodwill to become maladjusted to these things until the good society is realized. I never intend to adjust myself to the evils of technological man. I never intend to become adjusted to unrighteous and unjust laws. I never intend to adjust myself to the madness of militarism and the self-defeating effects of physical violence. For we live in a day when Sputniks and explorers are dashing throughout the space, and guided ballistic missiles are carving highways of death through the stratosphere. No nation can win a war. It is no longer the choice between violence or nonviolence. It is either nonviolence or non-existence. And the alternative to disarmament, the alternative to the suspension of nuclear tests, the alternative to placing power within the UN, the United Nations, and setting up a world's police force and disarming the whole world, may well be a civilization plunged into the abyss of annihilation. And I never intend to adjust myself to the madness of militarism. And I call upon all people of goodwill. So if you will allow the preacher in me to come out now, I'd say let us be maladjusted as the prophet Amos, who in the midst of the injustices of his day could cry in words that echo across the centuries. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. As maladjusted as Thomas Jefferson, or as maladjusted as Abraham Lincoln, who had the vision to see that this nation could not exist half slaved and half free. As maladjusted as Thomas Jefferson, who in the midst of an age amazingly adjusted to slavery, could cry in words that echo across cosmic proportions, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. As maladjusted as Jesus of Nazareth, who could say to the men and women of his generation, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, pray for them that despitefully use you. And I believe that through such maladjustment, we may be able to emerge from the bleak and desolate midnight of man's inhumanity to man into the bright and glittering daybreak of freedom and justice. And this will be that great day when the great American society will be realized. But we must continue to have faith in the future, realizing that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, realizing that there is something in this universe that justifies William Cullen Bryant in saying, truth, crust the earth shall rise again, realizing that there is something in this universe that justifies Carlyle in saying, no lie can live forever, realizing that there is something within the very structure of the cosmos that justifies James Russell Lowell in saying, truth, forever on the scaffold, wrong, forever on the throne. Yet that scaffold sways the future, and behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadows, keeping watch above his own. And with this faith in the future, with this determined struggle, I am convinced that one day we will be able to realize in this nation that day of true and genuine integration. This will be the day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands, singing in the words of that old Negro spiritual. Free at last, thank God Almighty, we're free at last. Now let me conclude by discussing very briefly some of the social effects of nonviolent mass direct action at LUCRE, because I believe it is too often limited in its application merely to the civil rights movement. Perhaps if there had been a broader understanding of the uses of nonviolent mass direct action in Germany when Hitler was rising and consolidating his power, the brutal extermination of 6 million Jews might have been averted and might not have ever had become totalitarian if Protestants and Catholics had engaged with nonviolent protests with the Jews by the millions and made the oppression of the Jews their very own oppression, and had gotten out in the streets beside the Jews to scrub the sidewalks. A new form of resistance to the Nazi regime might have developed. And I am fully aware today of the terror and of the intimidation and of the force that the fascists were so quick to use. But I am also aware today that some races of the same mentality have been curbed to their resistance to nonviolence when practiced on a mass scale. Today, men and women all over this nation and all over the world should be engaged in nonviolent protests to protest this world's economic policy. There is a dangerous silence today which unintentionally encourages evils to flourish. Was Albert Einstein not right when he said the world is in greater peril from those who tolerate evils than from those who actively commit it? Did not President Kennedy warn that those of us who do nothing are inviting shame as well as violence? For will the nation ever forget the surly impact of Rabbi Joachim Prince's admonition as he spoke at the March on Washington in 1963, when he said he was the rabbi of the Jewish community in Berlin under the Hitler regime. He had learned many things. The most important thing that he had learned in his life and under tragic circumstances is that bigotry, hatred, war, and poverty were not our biggest problems, but the most sinful, the most shameful, the most tragic problem here was silence. A great people who had created a great civilization had become a nation of silent onlookers. They remained silent in the face of hate, in the face of brutality, and in the face of mass murder. America must not become a nation of silent onlookers. America must not remain silent, not merely Black America, but all of America. We must speak up and act from the president down to the humblest of us, and not for the sake of the Negro, not for the sake of Black folks, but for the sake of the image and the ideal and the aspirations of America itself.